Hello and welcome to Politics Today. I'm Farhan Patafi. If you remember yesterday, we hosted a program on the plight of Kashmiris, especially the Indian crackdown in the valley and the way people have suffered, the way India has killed 17 innocent Kashmiris. The numbers varies from 17 to 20, but usually most outlets are actually claiming that it is 17 Kashmiris who were killed. And in that context, today also we are going to continue our program. We are going to talk about it, try to understand A, what exactly is happening there? Why is the Indian government using such brute force that so many innocents are killed? We have seen that innocent lives are not only being lost, we have seen people being blinded, and we have seen various kinds of torture in Kashmir. That is not all. We have to also try to understand what should be Pakistan's response, what should be the state of Kashmir's response to such an atrocity. And to help us understand these matters, we are honored to have with us the President of Azad, Jammu and Kashmir, Sardar Masood Khan Sahab. Thank you very much, sir, for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Right, sir. Sir, now, first of all, let us begin by this incident where 17 innocent lives were lost. What is your understanding? What is happening there? And why is Indian government using such repressive measures?
We are counting only 17 people who have lost their lives. These are mostly young men who were gunned down by the Indian occupation forces. But let me tell you that every now and then these cordon search operations are mounted, and as a result, many Kashmiris continue to lose their lives. They are brutalized, they are killed, maimed, then they are picked up, arrested, incarcerated, taken to prisons. So this is something which is a permanent feature. It is a pattern. It is not something that happened only a couple of days ago. This figure of 17, because of its scale, has attracted attention. Otherwise, there's a systemic and systematic violation of human rights, which should be rightly called crimes against humanity, which are being committed by the Indian occupation forces with absolute immunity.
Right. Mr. President, we have seen examples of incarceration, examples of people being killed in past many years, actually past 70 years. But recently we have seen the use of pellet guns and the way they have blinded innocent people there. And it comes back to the question of how to respond, because Pakistan has been agitating this point, Pakistan has been highlighting this point all over the world. It doesn't seem that that kind of violence is going to stop soon. What exactly is lacking in our strategy that we haven't been able to force India to stop using such techniques and this kind of barbaric, violence there?
Well, first, let's try to understand why the Indian occupation forces are killing Kashmiris. They're killing them because the Kashmiris are not their citizens. They are occupying their territory, and they're terrorizing them into submission. They want to intimidate them. They want to use brute force to silence their voices which demand liberty and freedom. So this is one big factor which we have to understand. I mean, I'll take you back to 1947 when they killed the Dogar army of the Maharaja, the Indian National Army, the extremists of Rashtriya Swayam Sevak Sangh. Together, they conceived a plot and they killed 247,000 Kashmiris in Jammu. Since then, they have been killing Kashmiris every year. For the past 7 decades, they've been killing them. And after the martyrdom of Burhan Wani, they accelerated the pace of killings. What is their philosophy? The philosophy is kill them or inflict pain and torture and punishment on the Kashmiris so that they are not in a position to bear that kind of pain or that kind of punishment. And that's why they have been resorting to the use of the pellet guns. They have been using these pepper gas and other brutal ways of terrorizing the population. Right. We have to understand that. There are 700,000 occupation forces deployed in the Indian occupied Kashmir, and they are pitted against civilian population, not against militants, indigenous militants, because according to India's own sources, official and intelligence sources, the number of militants is not more than 250 ill-equipped, unarmed militants. They are in fact pitted against hundreds of thousands of Kashmiris who come to the village or town or city squares and chant the slogans of Azadi, and they express their solidarity with Pakistan. Right. Now, your question was about what is missing in Pakistan's own strategy. Right. Nothing is missing in Pakistan's strategy. The people of Jammu and Kashmir, the people of Indian occupied Kashmir, and the people of Azad Kashmir, we are beholden to Pakistan for what it has been doing. Over the past 70 years, it has made many sacrifices. The country of Pakistan, the nation of Pakistan, was split into two because of Kashmir. And Pakistan had to develop nuclear capability to defend itself. That was also because of Kashmir, because Pakistan had become vulnerable and India had started threatening Pakistan to dismember the rest of Pakistan. Even today, the Indians and their allies in the international community would warn Pakistan against the consequences of its steadfast support to the Kashmiris. But Pakistan has remained steadfast, resolute in its support. But at the same time, I would say that Pakistan's state institutions, Pakistan's foreign ministry, Pakistan's diplomatic missions should accelerate the pace of their diplomatic activity, because Kashmiris are giving sacrifice for Pakistan. If you listen closely to their slogans, they say, Azadi ka matlab kya, la ilaha illallah, Pakistan ke saath rishta kya, la ilaha illallah. You have to understand, they're giving you a message that they are not with India anymore, not any segment of the population.
So let me try to rephrase this question, because I want to understand what can force India to stop this. I understand Pakistan might be doing everything, right? And Pakistan must be doing a lot. But India has incredible soft power, it has clout, it has influence, and for some reason, international media, international community doesn't seem to be paying that kind of heed. Is there a way to make Indian government stop this violation of human rights in Kashmir?
There's international community and international community. You have Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, Physicians for Human Rights. They have published extensive reports on the atrocities in Jammu and Kashmir, especially after the martyrdom of Burhan Wani. And they're available. And I think that the embassies of Western countries sitting in Delhi, they are monitoring the situation, that they send their reports. There is also UNMOGIP, the United Nations Military Observer Group in India and Pakistan. They regularly send their reports to the United Nations Secretariat, and they end up at the desk of the United Nations Secretary General, Mr. Antonio Guterres, or they should end up there. What is not happening is that these reports are not being referred to the United Nations Security Council. Kashmir is on the agenda of the United Nations Security Council. There are resolutions passed by the United Nations Security Council which have to be implemented through a mechanism under the auspices of the United Nations. You're talking about India's influence and clout all around the world. I think what we see is a demonstration of double standards. You know, because the West, the United States, the West European countries, they are entering into lucrative economic agreements with India. They have also declared India to be their strategic partner against or vis-a-vis China. And they think, although the West has its own direct relations with China, but somehow India has butted itself in and says that, well, I'll do your bidding in regard to China. Although it has very good relations with China, it has very robust relations with China. So this is India's dissimulation. The second thing is that India lies. I mean, there can't be any other word, more appropriate word than lying it invents these falsehoods and propagates them, because it is a victimizer, it is a tormentor in Kashmir, but it presents itself as a victim. And the freedom movement that is unfolding in Kashmir, India calls it terrorism or militancy, which it is not. I think that if you're talking about the deficiency in our strategy, in our overall strategy, I think that we are weak and deficient in communication, whether it is through the media or through the think tanks or through academic institutions or through our diplomatic outreach. We are not paying sufficient attention to the development of our communication skills. And India is far ahead.
India is so far ahead, sir, that we have seen incredible shoddy reporting in international media about Kashmir. And constantly we saw that those 17 people who have been martyred, who have been killed by the Indian forces, were being portrayed as militants, although we know that there were civilians who were killed as well. And yet this kind of reporting. Compare it to any other country, including the US, that does a lot of things, is pivot of Western power. But there has been reporting, negative reporting in the Western press. Even Israel is being criticized. But we don't see any criticism of India's position in Kashmir.
Yes, and this is because in Reuters, AFP, AP, other news agencies, also television networks, Indian correspondents, editors, and desk officers, they are embedded. And they are the ones who write stories about Kashmir. And they are part of the international media mainstream, and they can influence not only the tilt, but also the content of the reporting on Kashmir. Kashmir is facing an information blackout, because what goes out goes through the channel or conduit of India, and what you see published in the international media mostly is Indian narrative. And so if we want to counter it, if we really want to project the voices of the Kashmiris, we have to work in the realm of the media. And media includes traditional media, new media, social media, other channels of communication. There are many new platforms that are available. Now, people in Pakistan are quite media savvy because they're using social media, but their focus is Pakistan's politics, or to be more appropriate, wrangling in Pakistan politics. They devote too little attention to the Kashmir issue. You know, at the presidency of Pakistan on the 5th of February this year, a hashtag was launched. It is called hashtag Kashmir Matters. And when I go and speak to multiple audiences, I've been appealing to them, Pakistanis and Kashmiris, that they should use this hashtag and project the voice of the hapless people of Jammu and Kashmir who are being brutalized by Indian forces.
Right. This hashtag is there. But since you have talked about Pakistani media and Pakistani people's consumption of media as well, as president of Azad Jammu and Kashmir, do tell us what is your expectation from Pakistan's own media? Because we have seen that we seem to lack that kind of concentration or focus on the Kashmiri issue when it comes to private media, when it comes to reporting, sir.
I want to compliment Pakistan television because it regularly, consistently covers Kashmir, and it covers the suffering of the people of Jammu and Kashmir. It holds discussions on Kashmir. There are other media networks, private channels, which from time to time periodically focus on Kashmir, particularly when a dramatic occurrence like the massacres, recent massacres in Shopia. They would mobilize all the resources to develop a story, to comment on the atrocities, and to demand for justice for the Kashmiris. But normally, their attention is focused on internal political and economic matters, more on political matters, and more on political squabbles. So I think my appeal to the media would be, there are 2 or 3 newspapers. Is it all right if I take their names? There's the Express Tribune, they have a page on Kashmir. There's also Pakistan Observer. There's also our private channel K2, and they have exclusive programs on Kashmir. I mean, they are a regular feature. I want to pay tribute to them because they're doing a great service. Pakistan Observer, I can tell you that on one page covers all the developments in Kashmir during 24 hours. So I think that the newspapers, the leading newspapers, they should reserve one page, at least one page for Kashmir, what is happening. They should also move the news in Kashmir to the front page. And television networks should have a Kashmir policy. It should not be episodic. It should not be event driven. It should be a consistent policy, and that would develop more focus on Kashmir. The other thing is that the media is internationalized today. You have Al Jazeera, you have People's Daily, you have French outlets, you have Turkish media networks, Russian media network, also the United States Western media networks. Now there, I think that the people of Kashmiri or Pakistani extraction should seek employment and get themselves integrated into those networks so that they can balance the opinion about Kashmir.
Right.
And they can project the true picture.
Yeah. Since you're talking about Pakistan's response and Pakistani media's response, I have to actually compare it with India's. India has many English channels. Pakistan has only one, this one that you're talking to right now. And simultaneously, when it comes to Pakistan, they keep on bashing Pakistan every single day. They keep on focusing on Kashmir as well. We don't seem to have that kind of imagination for some reason.
Yes, and private channels there, they do a lot of work on Kashmir to project their narrative, to reinforce their own national security paradigm in regard to Kashmir. And they're very active. They are in the IOK. They also, wherever they are throughout India, they hold regular programs. They invite panelists. They look at pros and cons of government's policies, the situation as it is developing. They debate these questions whether or not Kashmiris belong to the Indian Federation. Whereas in Pakistan, most of the time there is silence on Kashmir because there are other issues,
right,
which get coverage, and Kashmir is dispatched to the back burner most of the time.
So you're saying this has to change, right?
This has to change, but at the same time, I want to compliment the anchor persons and correspondents of Pakistan also, even in the private channels, because whenever they have a direct contest with India, when there's some development and they participate in joint programs, joint television talk shows, they do give a robust defense of Pakistan's position, and they do project the voice of the Kashmiris. So I wanted to mention this to balance the picture.
Right. Apart from Pakistan, the world is also listening to whatever is happening. And we don't see that kind of response coming. And I know that the Prime Minister of Pakistan and the government of Kashmir have decided that they are going to send delegates all over the world. But before that, let me ask you, as the president of Azad, Jammu and Kashmir, what are your expectations from the World Committee of Nations right now? What can they do right now to stop these atrocities? And how to lessen the burden or suffering of Kashmiri people, apart from the long-term solutions?
I can't spell out expectations from the international community, because international community comprises sovereign states who make their sovereign decisions in the light of their national interests. Some, of course, do adhere to the principles and standards of human rights, or they do uphold the value system that has been embedded into human rights treaties and conventions and international law. But what I can say is that how we should relate to the international community, what decisions we should be taking. I think one of the fatal mistakes that we made in our policy was to engage India bilaterally on the issue of Jammu and Kashmir. India has used it as a hoax to buy time, to befuddle the whole issue, to confuse the whole issue, to make its presence in the Indian-occupied Kashmir permanent. And it has gained time to brutalize Kashmiris, to give them all sorts of economic incentives to stay with India. It has recruited some local allies in the form of PDP and the National Conference. Nothing has worked for it. Nothing has worked. Now, what we ought to be doing, and this is what you're asking me between the lines, that if we have to build expectations vis-a-vis the international community, we have to change our approach. And the change that we need, the critical change that we need to make is that we should make the international community our primary interlocutor. Right. And that would include the United Nations Security Council, the General Assembly, the Secretary General, right, and the Human Rights Council. We have to go to the permanent members of the Security Council and raise this issue. As I mentioned that...
You have been there as well and you have seen it all also.
Yes.
But here's a caveat. Although there was an implication in my question, but it was hardly anything to do, it had hardly anything to do with diplomacy, but expectations as president of a state. And seeing your own people suffering at this moment, you must get angry. Do you get angry, sir?
I do, and very sad.
And the impunity with which such suffering is actually treated all over the world?
Yes. I think we have a set of demands vis-a-vis India. It should rescind or withdraw its draconian laws. These are called lawless laws by Amnesty International. These are Armed Forces Special Powers Act. There is the Public Safety Act, POTA or TARA. All these black laws empower Indian occupation forces to commit crimes against humanity with impunity. So then we think that these forces should be 700,000 troops deployed there, which is, by the way, the maximum concentration of occupation forces in the history of the world. Right. Not just contemporary history, but in the recorded history of the world. Maximum concentration of occupation troops anywhere in the world, right, in any part of history. Now, they should be withdrawn, and civil liberties there should be restored. The political prisoners should be released, and these restrictions against the Hurriyat leaders should be removed. There's this joint resistance leadership which is unified, which shows unanimity on the issue of Jammu and Kashmir. But again, going back to the international community, my expectations that they should not demonstrate double standards. Instead, they should hold India accountable for human rights violations in IOK. They should have conversations with New Delhi bilaterally and in the context of the deliberations of the United Nations Security Council. The Secretary General, this Secretary General and his predecessor, they usually make an offer of using their good offices. But they add a caveat. They always say that they would use their good offices if India and Pakistan concur. Yeah. Why would India concur? Because India is the culprit. India is the perpetrators of these crimes, and it is hiding those crimes. It wants to hide those crimes. It has created a smoke screen behind which it commits all these crimes. So I think the Secretary General of the United Nations should drop this caveat. Right. And there are special envoys in other parts in Africa where you have peace and security situation. You should have a similar
focus here as
focus here. And you would recall that Prime Minister Shahid Khaqan Abbasi last year, while addressing the United Nations General Assembly, had demanded appointment of a special envoy on Kashmir in Jammu and Kashmir, and that needs to be reiterated.
And Mr. President, we are going to talk about that, but we have to take a small break before that. We will take a break. When we come back, we are going to discuss these matters further. Welcome back. Before going to the break, we were talking about the plight of people of Kashmir, Indian-occupied Kashmir. And I have with me the president of Azad Jammu Kashmir here in this program. Mr. President, before going to the break, we were talking about your expectation from the world community. And it is a serious issue that we don't see that kind of response coming. But there's another thing as well. We have seen after the martyrdom of Farhan, usually the pictures that would go on Google websites of that sort was of people suffering in Kashmir. And then all of a sudden, India started using another trick. It would, put pressure on or escalate on the line of control. And immediately, instead of an issue of human suffering, it would become talk of a nuclear flashpoint. The paradigm would change and it would become national security or international security issue. What exactly is India trying to achieve by keeping LOC active day in, day out, sir?
Well, India has adopted an offensive posture against Pakistan and treats Pakistan as an enemy. And in that context, it has unleashed 3 wars against Pakistan. One is the war in the Indian-occupied Kashmir, where it kills, maims, tortures young men and dishonors women and molests and rapes them. The second war is across the LOC. It deliberately, consciously targets the people in Azad Kashmir, Kashmiris in Azad Kashmir, and kills them, destroys their houses
on the other side
and
of
cattle.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, on our side,
right.
On our side, and kills people, including women and children, also destroys their property, kills their cattle, and causes a havoc. They do not engage military posts on our side. And they deliberately target civilians because they know that Pakistan armed forces would not target civilians on that side of the LOC in the Indian-occupied Kashmir, because we consider them to be our citizens, right, our own brothers and sisters. So they use those civilians as a human shield. The third war that they have unleashed against Pakistan is also an offensive war, is subversion in Balochistan, proxy wars throughout Pakistan, and also sponsoring and abetting terrorism in FATA, trying to penetrate into the political forces in Karachi and other parts of Pakistan. So it's a full-fledged war. Pakistan is in a state of war as far as India is concerned.
A Cold War?
No, it's a pretty much hot war, because there are casualties. There are casualties, and Pakistan is incurring losses. Right. Whereas Pakistan's entire posture is one of deterrence and defense against these Indian atrocities and Indian escalations. Now, you are absolutely right that when they escalate the situation along the LOC, they want to divert attention from their atrocities in the Indian-occupied Kashmir, and they want to give an impression to the rest of the world that the issue is not about the human rights situation or the human rights of the Kashmiri people, but it is about a possible clash between two nuclear armed states.
Right.
And that's why it deliberately tries to heat up the situation.
And all of a sudden, Kashmir becomes a nuclear flashpoint,
Yes.
as if there nobody lives and they don't suffer. It becomes something else.
Absolutely.
Right, it becomes a border. But regarding LOC, sir, on both sides, we see that it is Kashmiris who are actually losing lives, property. Because on one side, India keeps on torturing people under its control. And here they are actually shelling the communities and attacking people. The question is how to actually find a solution to this or how to respond. Because usually whenever we talk to policymakers, and this is really frustrating, is either they talk about engaging locally, making it a local skirmish, responding in kind, attacking their outpost, or then talking about escalating it into a proper war, a full-scale war. We don't see a third option. We don't see a fourth option. And it becomes really frustrating at times. Is there a possibility to explore more options here?
The first and the most sensible option is that India should abide by the 2003 ceasefire agreement, because India behaves irresponsibly along the LOC, and they should stop doing it. We were talking about the possible causes of why they do it. One cause is that they want to give this macho image to their electorate in India. The BJP, it has been losing some elections, it is heading towards another election, and it wants to give the impression to their citizenry that the BJP or their leader Narendra Modi they are very muscular and they give a very tough response to Pakistan. Now this is highly irresponsible. You said, what we can do damage limitation under the present circumstances, and the government of Azad Kashmir, the government of Pakistan, the armed forces of Pakistan together have decided that they would continue to give relief to the victims of Indian hostile fire along the LOC. We have decided that we would build bunkers for each house or each household along the LOC. Second, the compensation would be increased. It would be doubled or quadrupled. And the possibility of relocation of some of the people living along the LOC, who are very close to the LOC, that is also being considered. This is all that we can do. I think that we should demand, we should write to the President of the Security Council and to the Secretary General that unmogued reports about the situation along the LOC should be circulated to the members of the United Nations Security Council, and the Security Council should hold a discussion because it is the escalating situation, this situation that spasmodically erupts from time to time and threatens peace and security. This is in the jurisdiction of the United Nations Security Council's mandate in accordance with the United Nations Charter. They should do their duty in this regard and not be negligent, which they are right
Just to
now.
clarify this point, you're saying that these reports are not released to
They are sent to the New York headquarters, but according to my information, they are not being circulated to the members of the United Nations Security Council members, who should be the end users. In fact, what is the point of compiling these reports and sending them to the United Nations Secretariat where they are buried? They must be seen by the Security Council members.
Right. Any specific reason why they are not distributed?
This is because they do not want to focus on the issue of Jammu and Kashmir, because they think that this is politically too sensitive, too hot, too vociferous, and that's why they do not want to touch it with a barge pole.
Yeah, and this is what I heard from them as well when I was recently visiting. But the problem here is...
The other thing is, let me tell you one thing.
It is so hot that it can lead to a war, and a nuclear war. So shouldn't they be actually taking care of it?
One thing that I just want to share with you, India has successfully given this impression to the rest of the world that Kashmir is a bilateral issue.
Right.
That is between India and Pakistan, that the United Nations has nothing to do with it, that the international community or major powers have nothing to do with it.
Because of Shimla Agreement?
Because of Shimla Agreement and because of the bilateral talks that we've been having with them, whether it was composite dialogue or comprehensive bilateral dialogue, whatever you call it, India has used these dialogue processes to reinforce this impression that this is something between India and Pakistan, and it would be resolved in Islamabad and New Delhi, not in New York and Geneva or Brussels. Now, the fact is, they're very clever about it. When they sit across the table, I mean, we do not have very many rounds of these talks, bilateral talks, but whenever bilateral talks have happened or have taken place, Indians refuse to talk on Kashmir. During the bilateral conversations, they said that we can't talk about the issue of Jammu and Kashmir because according to Article 1 of the Indian Constitution, the entire territory of Jammu and Kashmir is an integral part of India. It's a falsehood, but this is how they start their conversation. And then when we press, when the Pakistani side presses for substantive talks on Kashmir, they would come up with this lame pretext that yes, we can talk, but we can talk about the incidents of terrorism in Kashmir which are being sponsored or supported by Pakistan.
So-called terrorism, right.
So they do not talk to us on Kashmir at all substantively, but they give the impression to the rest of the world that it is a bilateral issue. Don't talk about it. So that's why, this is my response to your question, that's why those reports which are sent by UNMOGIP, which is being sabotaged by India, we give full support to UNMOGIP, but India tries hard to scuttle this mission.
Right.
So that's why these reports are not circulated there.
But Mr. President, India has been shifting its position since 1948. It was India that took the matter to the UNSC. It is India that later on said now it has become a bilateral issue, and we just had ended up with a war before that. After its conclusion, the Shimla Agreement took place. And there are caveats. There are covers for issues that have been burning for quite some time. But even then, India has been shifting its goalpost. And it seems that every time it shifts its goalpost, our desire for peace is such that we end up still talking about it, and India uses it as a validation of its shifting goalposts. Is it true?
I would say that India shifted its position only 3 times. First, when it promised that, the so-called instrument of accession, when it was finalized, India promised to the people of Jammu and Kashmir.
It is going to show them?
No, that their wishes would be ascertained, that our final dispensation of the Jammu and Kashmir territory would be in accordance with the wishes of the people of Jammu and Kashmir. It reneged on that promise. Then it took the issue to the Security Council. When it took it to the Security Council, it solemnly signed up on an agreement about a plebiscite to be supervised by the United Nations. But then after that, the third shift that it made was that when it realized that the deal being given by the United Nations was fair and impartial, and they were working out modalities for holding a plebiscite under the auspices of the United Nations, it immediately drafted this constitution in which it annexed or tried to annex the territory of Indian occupied Kashmir with the Indian Union, and said that those fake elections which were held in the 1950s, that they were a substitute for the plebiscite. The people of Jammu and Kashmir had already exercised their will, and the only problem that needed outstanding was the status of the Azad Kashmir, which was with Pakistan. Ever since, they have not shifted their position. They have tried their best to reduce this issue to a bilateral issue. And They had their successes during Tashkent Declaration also, although it was kind of trilateral because Russian Federation or the Soviet Union at that time was the facilitator, similar agreement, and subsequent dialogue processes. They reduced. Now let me also tell you that they have used these bilateral talks or this bilateral engagement process to minimize the importance of the Jammu and Kashmir in the India-Pakistan agenda. It used to be a core issue before 1972. Now it is one of the 8 issues under composite dialogue and 1 over 8 under comprehensive bilateral dialogue agenda, which was finalized in the December of 2015. The second thing is that it has acquired a veto over the time frame.
Okay.
You know, once
out.
it has been agreed that there would be talks, after having diluted the issue of Jammu and Kashmir, we said, let's start talks. They say that we can't talk to you because you are sponsoring terrorism. And we say, let's talk about terrorism, and they would not come to the negotiating table.
And that actually takes me to the actual point that I was trying to make. Why do we need talks that badly that we end up looking like a party that actively needs it? And India keeps on pretending it doesn't need it. And that's why they keep on using it as a concession when they talk to us.
We don't need it, and Indian leadership, present leadership, is very arrogant. They have closed all doors on bilateral engagement. And their philosophy, if you want to sum it up, Kashmir policy right now is threefold. One is kill Kashmiris, punish them so hard that they are not in a position to bear this punishment. Right? Be brutal towards Kashmiris. Second is that do not talk to Kashmiri leadership, Hurriyat leadership, on the Kashmir dispute. Talk to them on law and order situation, the economic needs of the people, or other social and economic issues, but don't talk about the core issue, the core political issue of the status of Jammu and Kashmir, this as a dispute. And vis-a-vis Pakistan, they say, don't talk to Pakistan on Kashmir at all in the political idiom or in political framework. So they have closed all the doors, and their philosophy right now is kill, kill, and kill in the Indian occupied Kashmir.
Right, and there seems to be another plan, demographic shifts, the way they are changing the population and mixing it with people who have been brought out from outside Kashmir.
Yes, they're giving this special status to the so-called West Pakistan refugees, and they want to build, they have instead in fact started work on illegal settlements in which Pandits would live, Pandits who fled the valley some time ago. Also,
now they're
army
going to
personnel
live in colonies or
in colonies,
clusters.
like you have illegal settlements in Palestine. So, and they are also giving land to the Indian industrialists for investment. They are giving long-term leases for that. They are also killing Muslims. I mean, this is also a way of reducing the population, and they also want to increase the number of seats that they have given in their assembly to Pandits and to Hindus, both in Jammu and the Valley of Kashmir. And let me tell you that a stark statistic that I want to share with you. Way back in 1947, the percentage of Muslims in Jammu was 63%. And after the massacre, the Muslims Holocaust that took place there in 1947, in which they killed 247,000 Kashmiris. Today, the percentage of population of Muslims in Jammu is 33%. So, and this is being supervised by RSS extremists, because they're pursuing Hindutva, not only in the mainland India, but also in the Indian occupied Kashmir.
Right. On that sad note, I'm told that we have to actually conclude the program, but I have one question before we go. You have, although you are a statesman, a leader, but you have also worked as a diplomat. So that gives you a very pragmatic vantage point. Do you see any hope of India coming to its senses short of war?
India would not come to senses, but Pakistan can do quite a few things, Pakistan and Kashmiris. We should forge unity in our ranks. We should go back to the international community. We should use the combined strength of our diaspora communities across Europe, North America and the Gulf and the Asia Pacific. We should leverage the strengths we have acquired in the media. We should also make Pakistan and Azad Kashmir strong places, prosperous states. And finally, we should widen our outreach and make it much more effective. These are the options available to us.
Mr. President, thank you very much for your time, sir.
Thank you.
Viewers, you have listened to the President of Azad Jammu and Kashmir. The situation in Kashmir seems very dire. And the problem is that as we speak, what hurts me as a citizen of a free country and a citizen of the global community is the impunity with which such incidents are treated. Repeatedly, we have seen people being blinded, killed, maimed, their lives destroyed, their properties destroyed. And yet the world doesn't even pay lip service now. Somebody has to change. If the world doesn't change, if it keeps on doing it to others, then it is probably going to happen to them as well, those countries. Because if you think that democracy can exist in another part of the world despite killing or despite subjecting people to prejudices, then for sure it will happen in America, it will happen in Europe, it will happen in so many other places, because that's how things catch on. Let us end it and start paying heed to the plight of Kashmiri people. This was today's program. Thank you very much for watching us. Take care.